Good evening. I'm Michael Benson. I'm one of the founders of Photo London, which opens at Somerset House this week. I'm delighted to be starting Photo London Week with one of the most interesting projects to come out of the lockdown period. It's Peter Fetterman's extraordinary power of photography. There's no real better way of starting Photo London than to introduce a book called The Power of Photography. And it will be launched at the fair this week. It's also the Photo London Book Club Book of the Month. So there's a lot to live up to, Peter. And he's talking to Philippe Garner, who, amongst his many other attributes, is the chairman of our curatorial committee. I can't really think of two better people to be starting Photo London. Thank you both for doing this. I look forward very much to your conversation. In about 45 minutes, we'll be taking some questions. So please, everybody listening, do send your questions in, and I will try and summarize as best I can and convey them to these two excellent gentlemen. With that news, over to you two.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening to all of you out there. I'm Philippe Garner, and I have the privilege this evening of asking a lot of questions of fellow Brit, Peter Fetterman. I'm in London, he is in Los Angeles. And really the trigger, the hook, as Michael said in his introduction, is Peter's new book, The Power of Photography. It's a strong and simple message, and I wish I'd copyrighted it for my own purposes. But before we start looking at the book and specifically, the genesis of that book and some of the photographs in it, Peter, I would love to have something of your backstory. I think you and I have known one another in the marketplace, crisscrossing for many years, but I'd love to know a little more. For example, where did you get the bug? Where did it all begin?
I was born in Hackney, in the East End, before it was trendy, and I was brought up in basically a tenement, and I was always a kind of kid looking for a way to escape. And in my early days, I became obsessed with cinema and images, and then subsequently became obsessed with still images. Yeah. Because to me, they were both about telling stories. And I was just a curious kid. I wanted to know about the world outside where I was born.
Yeah. From what age? When did the film start catching your imagination?
I was 13 years old when I managed to scrape together enough money to go and see Lawrence of Arabia at the Leicester Square Odeon. And that totally blew me away. And that was basically the first film I saw. And I think the second film I saw was at the British Film Institute on the South Bank, John Ford's Grapes of Wrath, which also blew me away, tore me apart. And from that day on, I was interested in images that emotionally riveted me. Right.
Well, it's interesting that your experience is not so different from mine. And I think it's a kind of reminder from people of our approximate generation, because I don't think there's so many years between us, of how we got started with pictures before the digital age. I mean, the younger generation have everything at their fingertips. Yep. But for us, it was a very different world. And you in Hackney and me in Brighton, say, which is where I brought up, the horizons feel kind of limited in many ways. I don't know if you would echo that.
Well, there was something called libraries. And the library to me was my refuge. It was my holy place. It was a place I could just sit quietly, pick up a physical book and look at them and be transported. And, without libraries, and I get very upset when I hear libraries are closing, because without that experience of being in a library or being able to go to a matinee on a Saturday morning at the local cinema, I don't know where I would have been. And they were my saviors. Yeah, they were my rescue.
And you say that it was the stories that excited you, but also obviously the visuals.
Yeah, because it transported you. I mean, what does a poor boy from Hackney know about Arabia? I've never seen sand. So it ignited my desire to learn about the world I was living in. Not experiencing it firsthand, but that's what gave me the drive to embrace it.
Yeah. And what were the stepping stones from from film to the still image? Can you recall? Were there particular?
Well, my first real image was when I arrived in Los Angeles in 1979 off the banana boat, and
Yeah,
I'd made a couple of independent films in England. It was always a total struggle, and I thought, well,
sounds like you're jumping quite a bit of your life and career. How did you get from Hackney to Los Angeles? What happened between?
I was working for a book publisher, and I'd met somebody there who knew somebody who was written a novel. His name was Gordon Honeycomb, and he was a newscaster, a very well-known newscaster. And he'd written this ghost story, and he had an actress called Susan Hampshire who was attached to it. And it was going to get made. It didn't get made. I loved cinema, and I met Gordon and I met Susan, and I wanted to be a producer because I wanted to, I love movies. And Susan was so lovely. She used to come to the meetings with me because I was who was I? I was a nobody, but she was a star, and she was very gracious. And somehow, by some miracle, this movie got made. And I became a producer at quite a young age. And then I made another film with Mia Farrow, but it was always a constant struggle, and my personality really didn't fit into the movie world. You have to be a pretty brash, boisterous, egomaniacal somewhat to do it. And it didn't suit my personality. And then I became obsessed with photography and collecting photography. And I bought my first photo in 1979 for $400, which is on the cover of the book.
Hold it up. Okay, is that it was
taken by Max Yavno?
Max Yavno, yeah.
The image is called Premiere at Carthay's Circle. Right. And to me, this epitomized all my kind of like aspirations.
Okay, so there's a story to that choice of cover. My God,
it is. It's very personal and emotional, and I always believe that collecting photography is somewhat autobiographical, if not completely. I think you're attracted to images that resonate with some kind of your personal story.
I totally agree with you, which is why collecting by committee is such a hopeless endeavor.
Well, that's actually what got me out of the movie business, because movie making, for the most part, before somebody gives you $5 million, $10 million, $100 million, they're going to put you through the ringer, and everybody's going to have an opinion, and the odds are it's going to get compromised. And that's what happened to me. And I found very lucky to find my exit strategy by accident.
Yeah. So you decided to go to LA. How did that come to pass?
Well, I just got tired of struggling in England, and you used to call up a financier, and they said, "Well, can I come and talk to you about this project?" And they would, ruffle through their diary, and they said, "Well, I can see you in 9 months." And I thought, this is nonsense, So I got 3 pairs of t-shirts and a few pairs of jeans and went to Los Angeles. And when an English guy goes to Los Angeles and sees the sunshine every day, something happens. And but I ended up making a film for MGM, which was a total disaster. And I had to get out, and collecting photographs was my kind of therapy.
Okay. I think that was very brave of you to.
I think stupid. I mean, I'm crazy. When you're young, you do these most ridiculously irrational things.
Well,
right?
Brave means, in a sense, kind of fearless, doesn't it? But also that, and I guess in the late 70s, there was still a cherished thing for many Brits called the American dream. It hadn't got quite so tarnished as it is today, if I dare say.
No, it is tarnished.
And I can totally understand the lure, but it took some balls to do it, I think.
Well, there was no alternative, Philippe. I mean, I couldn't go back to my ancestral mansion and live off a trust fund. Necessity is the mother of invention.
So you turn up in the land of opportunity.
Well, the great thing about America, there's terrible things about America, racism, violence. But the great thing is that you can reinvent yourself if you are dedicated and hardworking. And sometimes people want to will you to be successful. which I always found very difficult in England.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the
Okay.
class system or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So
One-
I was naive, and my naivety, you know, got me through the day.
Yeah, good. And how did you go from being from collecting photographs to being to having your gallery? What were the
Well,
steps?
I felt very happy and inspired being surrounded by images. And I
Yeah.
thought, why can't I feel like this all the time?
Mm.
And then a little bell went off in my head, and I started out of my rent-controlled apartment in Santa Monica and my beat-up Honda. And
Yeah.
I was like the Tupperware lady. I had a few photos I'd collected. People used to host me on Sunday afternoons. I
Yeah.
maybe would sell one or two of them. I'd take the money on Monday morning and buy more. And this just escalated until,
So
until I
to
opened my
start with, you
first
were
public
selling
gallery.
them out of your suitcase.
I
So-
was the Bible salesman, except I
Right.
wasn't selling Bibles. I was selling photos that I believed in.
Yeah.
And back then at the day, you could buy great photos for not a lot of money. And that's how it
But
escalated.
I guess you could also sell them for not a lot of money, but hopefully you made some profits as you went.
Well,
But
you made a few dollars, and that
Yeah.
allowed you to put the gas in your Honda, which was your
Right.
traveling gallery.
Okay.
And then
can you recall some of those first photographs, some of those first customers?
they were, well, I can tell you some horrific stories, but
Do.
I once met the wife of a very famous Hollywood director, and she was having a manicure pedicure party. So, and she said, "Why don't you bring some of these photos, and maybe my friends will like them too." So this is the vision. This is the image of me going in my beat-up Honda to a famous Hollywood wife house with a small box of photos, and I was very concerned that the water wouldn't splash on the photos, but she was right. She was trying to help me, and a couple of her friends bought photos, and that was my life for maybe 2-3 years until I opened my first public gallery in Santa Monica, in Bergamot Station. And Bergamot Station was a pioneering art center, and I was one of the first tenants. So there we are. I knew nothing about running a gallery.
Right. And how much did you know? How much did you know about vintage photographs?
Well, I became an incredibly intense student. I practiced what I call photo aerobics. I trained my eye by reading as many monographs on individual photographers as I could, and as many histories of the medium. And I just became this nut. This was my oxygen, and that's all I did.
Right. Were there particular books that became the kind of Bible for you?
Well, the Bible was and still is Cartier-Bresson's The Decisive Moment. I mean, I've lived with that book for so many years, and I look at it at least once a week, and I learn something from it. And then there was Beaumont Newhall's History of Photography, and Hermann Gersheim's books. So I just devoured every single book that had the title for photography in it or was related to it. So I became an autodidact student.
Yeah. And did you have rivals? Who else was in the field in Los Angeles at that time?
The market leader was G. Ray Hawkins.
Yeah.
And he had a gallery, and G. Ray, was inspiring. He was kind of nuts, but he had a vision, and he had a gallery, and I aspired to be like him.
Yeah. And
so he was, and then my other mentor was Cornell Kappa,
right?
And the ICP back in those days on Fifth Avenue was the mecca for me. I would just spend hours and hours in the library and looking at the exhibitions. And then somebody we both knew quite well was Harry Lunn, and Harry Lunn kind of adopted me and gave me some advice and allowed me to buy great photos for him, on time. I said, Harry, I don't have all this money. Well, Peter, pay me off.
Yeah.
Take a year, 2 years. I mean,
He
that
was
incredibly-
wonderful
he
at
was larger than
supporting.
life.
Yeah. But he
he-
was great at creating that network where, you know, the principle that nobody wins unless everybody wins.
Yeah.
And just having those relationships of trust with dealers, often, you know, less experienced and less deep pockets than him, but just gradually building up a network that was self-perpetuating.
He had a generosity of spirit, and he was a super smart businessman, and knew that, you know, if I was going to be successful, if I became successful, I'd come back to him to buy more photos. So he was savvy on so many levels, but human.
Yeah, very. And I'm curious to ask, drilling down into a bit of detail, but did you take things on consignment from him as well? Was it a mix of buying and agenting?
It was a total mix of that. You know, whenever I had some money, I mean, he had the best material around, to my eye. I think I bought some of the greatest photos I've ever had from him, and he had an incredible range of material and a generosity. So he was my
well, I think his network was
drug supplier, you know.
Right. His network functioned in both directions, i.e. he had great support people finding things for him. And he then built himself a network of people selling things for him or buying them from him. So he was a wonderful operator and a great,
he was a genius in a way,
dynamo in the marketplace. God bless Harry. Now,
I mean, you have to remember, I was in Los Angeles in 1984 when the greatest coup in the photo market happened with the Getty, you know, entering into the game and buying up basically half the history of the medium in one fell swoop. So I think it helped for me to be in that city when that was going on.
Interesting, because that was only a very few years after your starting out, wasn't it? Interesting, of course, because the kind of Los Angeles was not perceived as a center of gravity for the subject, but it was
perceived as a silly, superficial place.
My God, 1984. Suddenly, it became LA. That's that's a magnet. It's their huge player. Interesting.
Well, I mean, our friends at the Getty pulled off the biggest coup of the 20th century.
Funny, you talk about
great
that.
collections.
And I bet you that you know, people, we say, our generation say, do you remember exactly where you were when Kennedy was shot? And we all do. But I mean, people in our business, mostly of our generation, also know exactly where they were when they heard the news of the Getty acquisitions. And I was in Switzerland having lunch with Bruno Bischofberger, and he learnt it and shared it with me, and we were both sort of gobsmacked.
It was a real coup. Never to be repeated.
No. Did it bring new collectors out for you? Did it have a quantifiable impact?
Well, it gave me, I suppose, the greatest sales line, which is, well, the Getty is collecting photography, and you can collect the same image that the Getty has. So why don't you? So it was a complete validation of this art form.
Now, we're talking and we're not looking at pictures, and I suspect that our audience would be interested to see some images from the book. But can you just give a little bit of backstory first on how the book came about?
Well, it was March 2020, and like everybody else, you know, we were all in kind of shell-shocked by this thing called COVID, and our world has totally shut down. And I'm sitting at my kitchen table, incredibly anxious and wondering, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't go to my gallery. It's closed. It's not going to open again. And suddenly the words, the power of photography resonated in my brain. And the silver lining of COVID for me was that I didn't have to do 12 art fairs a year and be on a plane or be in a rock and roll band. I had, for the first time in many years, I had stillness and quiet to think about what I'd been doing. And then all these memories started flowing back to me of all the great photographers I had the honor and pleasure to work with, and all these extraordinary images. And the idea was, well, why don't I spend a week writing a daily piece of a blog on a specific image and use a quote from the photographer and put my memory to it. And I thought I'd do it for 7 days and then would pack it in because nobody would really care. But for some strange reason, it took off. And people were telling me these daily images helped them get through the day, and they were sending them to their Aunt Lily in Des Moines. And people just wanted to sign up.
Yeah.
And so it just took off by accident. There was no genius on my part. I did it to help myself get through the day, but it helped other people connect. And it just took off, and people kept saying, well, why didn't you do a book? And then publishers approached me and said, well, we'd like to do a book of this. And so it just turned into this wonderful gift from the photo gods.
The book kind of created itself out of your blogging, but I love the informality of the way you started it. I think in a very appealing way set the tone for the whole thing.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm not a
mix of, it's very personal, it feels very spontaneous, which it was.
It is.
And the mix of having quotes from the photographer and quotes from you, anecdotes, which one has a sense it's all straight from your memory bank via your heart, and not laden with any sort of pretentious jargon. It's just, it's very immediate. And I think that approach chimes with the title of The Power of Photography, The Power of the Images. But I made a little shopping list of images, which I thought we might talk about, the ones I'd like to take home. So perhaps it's time for us to start having some of those up on the screen, and you can give us a little bit of background and in no particular order. So off you go. So
this is an image taken by Colin Jones, who was really under the wire and underrated, I thought. I always, being in exile in Los Angeles, I had a particular interest in British photographers. And I met Colin, and his life story is like Billy Elliot. He's a dancer, and dancing was his way of escape from his pretty tough East End background too. And I just love the humanity of this photograph and the beauty of it. And I was brought up loving all those great English movies, kind of loving Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, Billy Liar. And I just thought this was a gem.
It's all there. Yeah.
And my mission has always been to champion great British photographers. And I thought, wow, this is as good as it gets.
And he died quite recently, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He died last year.
Yeah. And his portfolio is surprisingly wide-ranging.
Absolutely.
This kind of documentary is core to it, but no, it's one I picked. I also picked it because it was by a Brit, and I wanted there to be some British representation in the choice.
This is Photo London Week, and there's a whole wonderful group of British photographers.
And I think you'd agree, if I suspect we'd both be on the same page in saying that if Colin Jones had been an American documenting the American scene, he'd be a national hero.
Yeah, he'd be Robert Frank.
Exactly. And in Britain, it's Colin who?
Well, there were so many photographers of that generation that like Bert Hardy, Wolf Szuzicki, extraordinary, Grace Robertson, and I had the great pleasure of working with most of them. I mean, extraordinary.
Let's have another image. Something very different, very simple, but very powerful.
Well, as an English guide, one of the great areas of interest to me and amazement was the racial situation in America and the civil rights movement. And I became totally obsessed with that subject and wanted to put on a civil rights exhibition in my gallery.
Yep.
And I realized, you have to have a great image of Martin Luther King. And I spent months and months, and he was a much photographed man, obviously. because of his importance and his charisma.
Mm.
But I came across this image by a man I didn't know called Dan Budnick, and I tracked Dan down, and I thought this was the greatest Martin Luther King portrait I've seen. And it was taken just a few seconds after he'd finished I Have a Dream speech.
Oh, wonderful.
And Dan
I love
was,
its simplicity. It's utter simplicity, but the mood, the kind of character, the pain, all the angst of it is there. Yeah, wonderful.
It's one of the great 20th century portraits, I think. I mean, in a way like Karsh's Churchill, this is, to me, the definitive image of Martin Luther King.
Yeah, very
the
good.
The grace and the power and the struggle, everything is in that 1 second.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Ah, what a contrast.
Well, you know, this is my queen. I'm still patriotic, and even though I'm in exile, and we do have a corgi, so I was attracted to this photo, and I didn't know the photographer, and I tracked David Montgomery down, and to me the strength of this image is she's so natural, she's so normal, and she's sitting in front of a 20-pound electric heater, and you're wondering, where is her household staff? Why aren't they making this a beautiful log fire? This is the queen, for God's sake, you know.
It's wonderfully human, and I think it holds together so brilliantly as a picture. But David Montgomery is an American, but who's been based in London for decades, since the 60s, isn't he?
Yeah, he came over in the swinging 60s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hold him in very high regard as a photographer, and I don't think he's known by any means well enough. He's got a staggering portfolio.
Incredible.
Anyway, we'll talk about that another day. Maybe we should champion him.
I think my mission as a gallerist has always been to champion the great photographers who've never got their due. I mean, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Very good.
I don't think Cartier-Bresson needs too much help, or Robert Frank or Diane Arbus, but there's a whole slew of great photographers that should be better known, and that's my job. And
well, one of the dilemmas here is, I think that, I mean, David Montgomery is the archetype of the photographer who was working for the printed page in an ephemeral context where the pictures have their impact, they do their job, and then they disappear somehow.
They're disposable.
Yes, all too ephemeral. And I'm not sure that David he's never had a major show, as far as I'm aware, has he?
No, we did actually donate some of his Queen images to the National Portrait Gallery.
Yeah.
And we're hopefully trying to do a book of all these great images with him.
Yeah, good. Who comes next after Her Majesty? Oh, something else entirely. Yeah.
Well, here's another great under the radar photographer called Georges Dambier. And Georges was the chief fashion photographer for Elle magazine during the 50s. And I just thought this has got all the whimsy and charm of a great fashion photographer.
Yeah.
And I love fashion photography. I think it's a serious art form, and it's not superficial. So I've always collected fashion photography and continue to. And I was very lucky to work with Lillian Basselman for the last 20 years of her life. And there again, somebody who's totally underrated.
Tell me, remind us the name again,
Georges Dambier.
Dambier, yeah.
Yes.
For Elle.
Elle magazine in the 50s.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's not fair on either to compare it with Avedon's Paris Street pictures, but
why not? That's what I thought when I saw them. I thought, well, my God, there's Georges.
No, but I just always feel, no, it's a Georges Dambier picture. It's not an Avedon picture.
Exactly.
But Avedon could have signed something. Could have signed this. It's got a lovely freshness to it, and I guess that's also something about Elle at that time, which was slightly less formal than Vogue and Harper's. Yeah.
Well, I think it was less corporate. You know, Condé Nast was a big corporation and everything kind of maybe controlled a little bit more, but it has a whimsy and a joy that puts a smile on my face. And she's beautiful.
Yeah. And he's one of your stable?
Yes.
Yeah.
We were we are, I suppose, his premier US gallery.
Yeah. Is he still with us?
No, he passed away. He passed away, but we worked closely with his son.
Right.
Who's wonderful. And Georges, towards the end of his life, after he gave up fashion photography, opened a beautiful small hotel.
Okay.
Hotelier.
Anyway, it's a great picture. Thank you.
I think my advice to collectors is seek out those who are so affordable, but maybe under the radar, and just trust your instincts.
Yes.
Don't overanalyze the pedigree of the photographer.
Yeah. Trusting your instinct is key and core. And going back to what you said about collecting being an autobiographical process, it is. It's not by listening to what other people's suggestions that you will build something that's meaningful for you. It's finding out who you are by trusting your gut. Yeah.
And also on a pragmatic level, Philippe, you can buy great photos that are still affordable.
The market is a very curious place because certain things become tradable commodities at substantial prices, but there's plenty of fun to be had in the byways rather than the highways, one might say. Yeah,
I think that's how you can create a particular identity to your own collection. You just follow your taste. Anyone can buy a Richard Avedon photo if they have money.
Yeah.
But the skill and the challenge and the joy is to find that next generation of great photographers who, in terms of their pricing, will escalate.
Yeah. Let me see the next picture. No, that's a classic.
Well, this is a dream.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have a great relationship with Cartier-Bresson, who was my god, still is, and my mentor, and his wife, Martine Frank, was so helpful to me in my career. And I think without them, I wouldn't have had that career. And this is an image which hadn't been printed before. And we actually made it famous because anyone who sees this photo wanted to buy it. It's just a total dream. And it was an accident. And this is called Queen Charlotte's Ball.
It's Queen Charlotte's Ball. You've made it famous with him, for him. I know it like I know the face of an old friend. And I hadn't realized that,
And I said to Henri, well, why haven't you made signed collector's prints of this amazing image? And he says, Peter, no one asked. And this was, I think our relationship was wonderful because he was always amazed that I could sell lots of photos for him. And he used to say to me, Peter, no one buys my photos in Europe. So and this I thought was a gem.
It is. I mean, what it reminds us of is Cartier-Bresson's utter brilliance at filling a rectangle, that 35mm 2x3 proportions, where everything in the frame is relevant to the structure. Everything fulfills its role, and it just hangs together utterly brilliantly. And you know that it was captured in a blink.
Well, the story behind it was, Queen Charlotte's Ball was this posh social occasion, and Henri was invited, and he was totally bored by the whole thing. And then he was about to leave and saw a stairway, and he climbed these stairs and overlooked what was going on and just took this image and then left.
It's also an image made for the medium of black and white, isn't it?
Well, it epitomizes it. It's poster. It's a poster shot for black and white photography.
Very good. What's next in your treasure bag? Oh, yeah. Tell us about this.
Well, John Dominus was the photographer, and he was one of the chief photographers for Life magazine. And Life had, the editors of Life, they hired a lot of great photographers, from Eugene Smith, Alfred Eisenstadt. And they asked John to cover Jacques d'Amboise. That's the man in the photograph.
Yeah.
And he was one of the chief male ballet dancers for ABT, the American Ballet Theatre.
Yeah.
And John went to see him, and there he is, just playing with his two children. So to me, it was not really a portrait about Jacques d'Amboise. It was a portrait of fatherhood. And I remember when I first came across this image when I had my first child. And so there again, it's personal. There's something so joyous and wonderful, and expresses the emotion of being a father. Well, it did to me. And I think it's one that's great.
It has such grace, and one knows also it has such spontaneity.
Yeah, I mean, you can't direct this, you can't pose this. John didn't say to Jacques, "Just swing your children around, will you?" He just was tracking him, observing him, talking to him, and this happened.
Yeah, I realized so far, with the exception of Her Majesty, we have been black and white, haven't we? In what proportions are black and white color in the book?
I think it's probably 90% black and white, 10% color, maybe even less color. I'm sorry to say, I do respect color photography.
It's interesting.
I think, but the power to me of photography has always been the black and white image. And, if you look at Scorsese's Raging Bull, that's shot in black and white, you can't imagine it being shot in color.
Yeah.
In streets. I suppose to me that's always been the power.
It's an interesting point, which I hadn't thought of before about the book, because you're right, it is predominantly, but it wasn't a conscious decision. It is that's
no.
Your instinct and aesthetic leaning, I guess. Yeah. What's our next picture? Jackson Pollock.
Well, I love images of artists. I'm interested in the psyche of the great artist. And from a practical point of view, I could never collect a Jackson Pollock or a David Hockney or a Modigliani. So for me, my voyeurism is satisfied by a great artist portrait. And I've collected many great artist portraits over the years. And Martha Holmes, here again, was one of the pioneer female photographers hired by Life magazine.
Yeah.
And they sent her off to Jackson's studio. And I think this is the great portrait of Jackson Pollock. I mean, you're there with him. You understand his process and the attitude and the cigarette and everything about it is just extraordinary. And then there's the painting to the left of the frame. One he's just completed, and now he's on his next one. So it's voyeurism for me.
Yeah, I'm picking up on a word that you used. You said you had collected, and I think it kind of begs the question of you're a dealer and you're a collector, and how do you reconcile, or does the dealing give you all the? Is it the thrill of the chase, and you're then always happy to sell on? How does it work?
I have to be honest with you. I was a hoarder. I hated to sell photographs, particularly ones I loved.
Yeah.
But you can't survive doing that, because you have a moral and ethical obligation, I think, as a dealer, to offer your clients the best material that you have found. And it was very painful for me for many years to part with these great photographs. But then another little bell went off in my head, and I adopted this kind of quasi-Buddhist approach to my life, which is, okay, I've collected these images, I've learned from them, they're always going to be a part of me, but I don't now have to physically have the material object anymore.
Yeah.
It's my kind of moral responsibility and duty to pass them on to another custodian. And that makes me feel good. It
Yeah.
makes me feel better that I'm not just a hoarder, which is
Right.
what I used to be. And then I
But
started
what I can see from the way you talk about every picture and about your activity as a dealer is that you have the passion and drive and curiosity of the collector, and that defines the way you gather in your stock, I guess. And perhaps you don't even wouldn't you balk at such a vulgar term as stock, because you sort of haul in your treasures. I have the sense from a deep passion for what you find.
Well, I can't do it any other way. I mean,
Yeah.
I admire dealers who candidly say to me, well, I show this because I know it sells. I've never been able to do that, and I can't. And, you know, God bless them if they can do that without any kind of deep emotional commitment. But
have you built up some good relationships with some of your collectors, and you feel in a sense that have you helped them build collections, so you feel vicariously a kind of sense of ownership of what they've done?
Well, I that's been one of the richest joys of my life, is that I have built up extraordinary collectors, and it's not just a business transaction. They become friends, and that's the richness of this field, that you can have that. It's a bonus. It's an amazing plus to what you do. And I do say to them, half jokingly, well, if I sell you this photograph, Joe, you have to promise me visitation rights. And I really mean it, because I want to see these photos again.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy they've gone to as much of a loving home as I gave them. But that's part of the joy. And so when I
understand that. I mean, from my perspective as an auction specialist, I've been asked many times, well, doesn't it break your heart? Aren't there things that you would like to own that pass through? And I say, you know, I feel I've been in such a privileged position to have this intense relationship with these works for a short period of time, but that it's a never-ending flow of treasures. And I've probably handled more photographs than most of my clients. And as with you, sometimes I might be in a museum and I see something on the wall and, oh, an old friend that passed through my hands. It's hugely satisfying.
It's the most satisfying aspect of our job, and they're never going to leave you, Philippe. These images are always going to be part of you. You have the ability to record them. You can remember them, like you remember a favorite novel or a favorite piece of music or a favorite person.
I remember somebody was asking me the question recently, and I said, you know, each encounter is like an intense love affair.
It is.
You get so excited about the picture. But I said, with a smile, I said, you know, my profession obliges me to be promiscuous, and it isn't so bad.
It's what gets us out of bed in the morning, Philippe. It's the next great love that you're going to encounter.
Okay, so what's the next one that you're going to show me? Ah, the cover of your book.
Well, this is the first photograph I ever bought, and it happened by accident. I arrived in Los Angeles in 1979. I was taken to a small dinner party, and it turned out the host was a commercial photographer, but he'd built up a small group of photos, but he also collected cars, and his wife said, you can't buy another vintage car until you start selling these photos. And so it turned out this small collection was for sale, and I was totally like a magnet. I was drawn to this image because it was all my aspirations at the time. And I shyly said, well, how much is that? And he said, it's $400. And I had a net worth of $2,000 to my name. I'm driving a beat up Pinto car. If I was rational, I would have spent the $400 having new brakes put on the car. But I bought this, and this image changed my life.
Ah, wonderful. Well, I love the way, it brings the cinematic part of the film part of your life and the photograph chapters together. Yeah.
So it's incredibly autobiographical, and I thought, well, I have to put this on the front cover, don't I?
Yeah.
and it seems to work.
Yeah, it just allows all the space you need for the type in that top right corner. Perfect. And the photographer is Max Yavno.
Yes, who I subsequently met, and he was there again, another great photographer who was totally under the radar and totally underappreciated, and still is.
And
so
remains.
Wherever I can find a great Max Yavno photograph, I buy it.
You must know the very famous photograph of the backs looking at the spectacle on Muscle Beach.
Yeah, Muscle Beach, absolutely.
And a friend of mine who started buying photographs on my encouragement in the early 70s bought a beautiful vintage print of that, which he still cherishes. And Max Yavno, but he deserves a little more recognition.
Well, that's my job, that's what the role that we all have is champion people we believe in.
Yeah. Let's see what's next. Oh
my God.
I gasped at each of them because I chose these for us to project. This is my kind of a desert island selection. And I hasten to add, it wasn't easy. The story of this guy, you tell your story and I'll tell mine.
Well, I spent most of my early life in London in darkened cinemas. I used to go to the Everyman in Hampstead and the Academy Cinema on Oxford Street. And I became obsessed with French Nouvelle Vague cinema. And to me, the gods were Truffaut and Chabrol and Godard. And I've always wanted to find a print of this. And I could never, ever find Raymond Cochetier, who took it.
Yeah.
Yes, he didn't have an email. There was nothing listed by him. But
What's that?
Sorry, that's a phone coming in.
Okay, sorry.
So I end up trying to find Raymond, and I get introduced to him by a cinematographer here, very famous cinematographer, knew him, called John Bailey. And John gave me Raymond's contact information. And the next time I was in Paris, I went to see him, and he lived in the same 5-floor walk-up apartment building that he was born in.
Yes,
so I went to see him, and I get to the 5th floor, and forgive the pun, but I'm breathless. But then,
very good.
I couldn't believe his archive. So this was such a seminal image for me.
Right. Oh, I had the privilege of meeting him a couple of times and visiting him in that apartment. Yeah. And there was one time we were going to have lunch together, and we were going to meet in the restaurant, and he was a no-show, sadly, and his wife told me that it was because he knew he could get down those stairs, but he wasn't confident he could get back. But we managed it a subsequent time, and he'd lived, as you say, in that apartment where he lived there 100 years. It was the apartment he was born in. Magic.
And in my film producing days, I tried to get a film made in France, and it ended up meeting Gene Seberg along with Anna Kamena and all the other great.
I'm keeping an eye on the time. Have we got time for one more picture? And then we should probably revert to questions. Well,
here again, this is by Sabine Weiss, who passed away sadly last year. And she was the last great French humanist photographer from the 50s who I got to meet and work with. And I love the car. I just love the mood. If it hadn't been shot in the rain, there would be no image.
Oh, no, it's magic. I love the layers that the rain on the glass creates. Gorgeous. And I love the softness of it. I mean, it's photography doesn't get any better. The whole question of what do we mean by technical perfection. There's some pictures which can be soft like this, and it's perfection in its own way. Absolutely. And keep eye on that clock. Is there one more picture? Did we have? How many did we have? I think this was the last one, and another great picture. It's all about the light.
And this was taken by Ted Kroner. Here again, another great American photographer under the radar. But it caught the attention of Bob Dylan, and Bob put this on the front cover of his Modern Times album. So if we look, us Bob Dylan fans, respect
that's
his
a
eye
great
as well.
endorsement. But
Yeah.
it's the kind of picture you can't plan. I mean, I love it when chance plays its part in the making of a picture.
And Ted was part of Brodovich's design studio class, and and Brodovich said, go out into the city. This is your sign. Come back with something special. Astound me, the famous two words.
That's
right?
it. Very good. A wonderful selection. I'll take the lot. Thank you.
Very good.
Peter, maybe it's time to see if any questions have come in.
Sure.
Okay. Hello, guys. That was brilliant. Thank you. There's been a lot of people saying, asking Peter how you made your selection and how you decided to leave certain things out.
Well, we're up to close to 700 daily blogs, and it was incredibly difficult to distill them to 120 images for the book.
Sure.
But I suppose I asked myself the question, if the building's on fire, which ones will you grab first? So these 120 were the first ones I would grab. Okay, it's not to say that the others, it's a painful editing process.
Sure.
Well, unless the book turns into a series, this is part one. So. We'll see.
We hope it's going to be like Harry Potter,
Yeah, there's another question about that. I mean, because people are saying the blog is still going on. So are you planning part 2?
I am planning a whole series of books. I think I've opened up my Pandora's box, and now I can't stop. So I'm going to be hopefully doing a daily blog till I drop dead. So there we go.
And so someone has asked, Peter, you mentioned the photographs that you take with you from a burning building. Which was if you were allowed only one, which one would it be?
Well, I suppose it would have to be the cover image, because that's how I lost my virginity to become a photo collector. This is my first love, my first acquisition. I don't think I can live without this photograph.
Okay. And there's another question about
Zoomed in London. Sorry. Sorry.
That's a photographer asking why they're not in the book.
Yeah. Yes. Swap them that.
Yeah. No. There is a question about how have photographers who aren't in the book, has anyone reacted and said, why aren't I in it, Peter? What are you doing? Or has everyone been very?
Oh, I think most of my photographers have been very accommodating and sensitive to the fact that editing 700 images down to 120, and they will be in the next film.
Yeah,
so hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're not.
Sophie's choice, isn't it? How do you choose between your children? Yeah.
Exactly.
There's another question for both of you, which is to try and summarize the way in which you approach a photograph when you first see it. What are the first things you both look for?
Well, Philippe, would you like to begin?
I try very hard not to go out, not to be looking for anything. I'm waiting to be taken by surprise, I think it would be my answer. And I let the first reaction should be spontaneous, a kind of quote unquote love at first sight. And then I might ask myself questions about what made me react that way. But it isn't always the same thing. It's it's about having one's antennae always alert and just being ready to be surprised.
I would echo that. I think you have to have your eyes and your heart open, and that great Brodovich quote, "Astound me."
Mm-hmm.
I want to see an image maybe I haven't seen before, or that elicits an emotional reaction from me that I don't often have.
Pictures do speak. They speak. I mean, it's somebody's message to you. It's somebody's message to us collectively. And you sometimes you pick up a picture and you get it. It touches your heart, your gut, your whatever.
I try not to be analytical. I just let it hit me in the heart. It's like an arrow.
the older I get, the more I find myself using the phrase "don't overthink it."
Yeah. Okay. Good. And is there anything at the moment you're Peter particularly? You're a collector as well as a dealer. Are there things that you're pursuing at the moment? Things you really wish you had and haven't managed to acquire yet?
Well, that happens to me every single day. I mean, I think I'm becoming more and more interested in 19th century photography.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm obsessed with Julia Margaret Cameron.
Yeah.
But that's what's great about this field of photography, is that there's always something new for you to discover and lust after and go after. And the great thing, you all have a wonderful opportunity this week at Photo London to indulge yourself and open your eyes and your heart and go and support this amazing fair and all these amazing dealers who, like myself, are crazy enough to have dedicated their life to doing this. Yeah. So seize the day. This is a good week for London.
Absolutely. And there's another question about Photo London, actually, and you have a beautiful booth made of photographs for your collection. Are they for sale? Are you letting them to go to good homes, or are you showing,
yes,
just showing us?
Everything you see, as I said before, I'm just a temporary custodian, and these images are all part of me forever. Now is the time for them to find new homes. So everything in the booth, in our beautiful booth in Photo London, is available. But get there quick.
Can I ask the same question about the book?
In
terms of whether you would let anything go if somebody really wants. I mean, I'm thinking of your cover shop. Okay.
I think apart from the cover shop, which I'm going to lie to somebody if they want to buy it, I'll say it's sold. But
it's reserved.
It's reserved. It's reserved for Mr. Garner. Yes, because I'm on a pragmatic level. You know, I want to do more books. I'm now become obsessed with making more books. This experience has been such a rich experience for me, so that I have to sell all the photos to get the money to buy new photos for the new books. So it's a merry-go-round.
It's the way the wheels go round. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you get older, you can't become a hoarder. You have to let go, and that's the joy for me. Yeah. I know somewhere I can find an equally great group of images. That's my mission now. I do want to, like Harry Potter, have a series of these books. Good. And I'm working on the next one, so stay tuned.
Okay, I think that's about it for the questions. Thank you both very much indeed. It's been fascinating to hear. Peter, I'm looking forward to seeing the book in your booth in a day or two. And I'm sorry you won't be with us at Photo London in person, but I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
I'm signing up for the next 5 years, Michael. Okay,
I know. Now that's being recorded, Peter. So you don't.
Yes,
that's a contract, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Peter. Very much.
It's been such fun talking with you.
Likewise.
Really enjoyed it. Look forward to the next time, and to doing it in person also. All the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And thank you, Michael.
People writing in and saying how much they enjoy your blog. So keep up the good work. I think is what.
I've got to go. I've got to keep healthy. I'll do it. Thank you.
Stay healthy. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.